Alright, now that we got the table view up and running, it's time to focus our attention on the PickerView. So what we're going to do now is write the code in our PickerView controller to get our data to display similarly like how we did with our table view. So you're going to find the table view controller, the code for getting the table view up and running is very similar to PickerView, and consequently you can take it further to collection view and so on. Apple really designed the code to be consistent, so it's once you learn one, you can actually learn the other two very easily. So with PickerView controller, we're going to need to bring in UI PickerView Delegate and UI PickerView Data Source. So once we have that, we're going to need some support methods to get our picker up and running. But before then, just like with the table view, we're going to need to get access to our app delegate. So we're going to say let main delegate equal UI application dot shared dot delegate as app delegate. Alright? And inside view.load, let's do a little refresh of our data. So we'll say main delegate dot read data from database, just to refresh it, just in case we did an insert and the data didn't get put in properly. Now that we have that, let's get the support methods up and running to get the picker to display the data we need. And the concept is very similar to the table view. So we're going to need a method called number of rows in component. This will tell me how many rows there are in a particular picker view. So I'm going to return main delegate dot people dot count, just like before. Now the next support method in the table would have been how thick is each cell, but here the thickness of each row in a picker view is constant. We can't override it. But we need another support method called number of components in picker view, and we'll return 1. What this method means is that it's asking for how many columns there are in the picker view. So if you think about the date picker had a few columns in there, one for like date, and then maybe hour and minute, and then AM, PM, right? So there were a few columns in there. Here, we have to specify how many columns there are, and consequently, if we had more than one column, the number of rows in component, we'd have to specify the count for each individual column in that picker view. But we're only having one here, so we're not going to care much about that at all. The third method would be what should be displayed in each row in the picker view. So that's called title for row. And you'll notice it returns back a string. So what's nice about this is that we know that it's always going to be text that the picker view displays, so we don't have to do any fancy work to get the picker to display the data we want. It's hard-coded, it's only one label ever, and so there's not much to work with. So we're going to return back main delegate dot people. Now the argument passed in is called row. It's of type int. So there's no index path here. So I'm going to take row directly. So I'm going to say people of row dot name. So I'm going to put the name down. Now these three methods alone are enough to get the picker up and running. The fourth method we're going to bring in is a rarity, because it's not always that you might select a row in a picker and have some action happen, but you may. So let's learn how to do it anyway. So we're going to add in a did select row, which is kind of like our event handler for the picker, so that in case we want to execute some code upon selecting something in the picker view, we can go ahead and do so. In our case here, we're going to launch an alert box and have the alert box display our email and food for that particular person, whereas the picker view will just display the name. So we'll go through our 4 steps again of displaying our alert box. So we'll say let alert controller equal UI alert controller. And we'll choose the last one, which is title, message, and preferred style. So title will be main delegate dot people. Again, passes in argument row of type int, so I don't have to worry about any index path. So I'll say of row dot email, and then the message will be main delegate dot people of row food. Preferred style alert. Next thing we need in our alert box is a button to say OK. So say let cancel action equal UI alert action. And we'll have title, style. So title will just be OK. Style is .cancel. Handler nil, so no event handling needed at all. We'll add the cancel action to the alert box. So we'll say alert controller add action for cancel action. And finally present it to the screen. So present. And we'll say alert controller animated, we'll say true. I'm going to take out the completion handler. We'll just say alert animated true. And that's enough to get our picker up and running. More than enough, actually. So we got our support methods for the picker view, very similar to the table view. So all we have to do now is just jump over to the storyboard and connect things up, give it a run, and verify that our picker is up and running. So we'll jump over to main storyboard. And there's our picker view. Have our connections inspector open, highlight the yellow circle. Let's click on our picker view. We have data source and delegate. Connect those up to the yellow circle. And give it a run. Alright, we can see our queries, our past input has been retrieved. So I'll say view database using picker. And we see our Munkee, llama, and Yoti. I'll just start with Yoti. Alert box, Yoti at projectmankitty.com, like steak. Choose llama. Llama at projectmkt.com, likes hay. Finally, Munkee. Munkee at projectmkt.com, likes bananas. Alright, so now we've got the picker view up and running. We've got the table view, we've got the picker view. Now, let's do some data input. So we have here our 3 text fields for name, email, and food, which we'll fix up in a moment. We have a save button to save our data. So since we're in the storyboard, let's make it a little more user-friendly. So I'll click on name there, the name text field. Under placeholder, I'm going to put name. Maybe I'll center justify it. Second one will be email. Center justify as well. And food. Center justify as well. So we got our name, email, and food. Now what we need to do is we need to write the support code to get an insert happening. So we're going to start off inside app delegate and get a new method created. So here's a good location before checking create database. We're going to create a new method. Func. It's called insert into database. We're going to pass in a person object, so we'll say person of type data. It'll return back a bool. Now we're going to have some similar steps to getting a transaction to happen, like reading data from a database, but this time we're going to insert into the database. So we're going to be using C pointers as well to get this to happen with the SQLite libraries. So first thing to do is to declare a DB object. So we'll say var DB of type opaque pointer. We'll set it equal to nil. Now I'm going to set up a return code. So we'll say var return code of type bool equals true. And to get rid of the error, I'm just going to say return code. Just get that out of the way. Now the steps to do this type of transaction for an insert, very similar to a query. Slight differences, of course, because we're dealing with an insert. So first thing we'll do is open a connection to our database. So we'll say if SQLite 3 underscore open. We'll pass in our self.database path and the location to our database, so ampersand DB. We'll check to see if that's equal to SQLite underscore OK. And we'll put an else saying unable to open database. So we'll say else print unable to open database. But we'll also add the return code value. So we'll say return code equals false. Right, so it can return back a false, so for a failure, so it doesn't trick the user into thinking an insert happened. But once we're in, now we can start preparing our query for an insert. So we're going to need a variable called insert statement of type opaque pointer, set it equal to nil. But we're also going to need to set up our string. So we're going to say var insert statement string of type string is equal to insert into entries values. And so because we're doing an insert, think back to how we did the insert manually at command line. We want to auto increment our ID column, so we put null in. So we're going to do that again here, so it auto increments the ID column. Then we'll say comma. Now for name, email, and food, string joining is a real horrible thing to do here, to get it right especially. So we're going to use something slightly different. We're going to use question marks for name, question mark for email, question mark for food. Those represent placeholders. And we're going to replace those question marks with proper data in a moment. Now the next step is to malloc some memory up for our insert statement. So we're going to use the prepare function. So we'll say if SQLite 3 underscore prepare v2. We'll pass in our database object, so DB. We'll pass in our query string, so insert statement string. We'll say how many bytes is this transaction going to be limited to. We'll just say -1 because we don't want a limit on the number of bytes. Then we'll pass in the memory location of insert statement. So we'll say ampersand insert statement. And we'll say nil for the last argument, like no additional data. We'll check to see if that's equal to SQLite underscore OK as well. Let's put in our else with a message, so else print, and the message will be insert statement could not be prepared. Set return code to false. But assuming it is okay and it enters in, we're now ready for our transaction. So what we need to do is we have name, email, and food. Name, email, and food are of type string. We need to get it into a C string, but the problem is there's no functionality to do that. There's no functionality to convert a string to a C string, but there is the functionality inside NS string. So we have to convert our strings to NS string, and then we can convert our NS strings to C strings. So first step, we're going to say let name str equal person.name as NS string. We'll do the same thing again. So let email str equal person.email as NS string. And then finally let food str equal person.food as NS string. Now we need to replace those question marks above. So these question marks here need to be replaced with name str, email str, and food str. So we have a function we can use, similar concept to how we did the select when we were trying to extract out some data. There is this function called SQLite 3 underscore bind. Before I finish it, there's bind int, bind null, bind text, bind blob, bind so on and so forth. So many. So we're going to just do bind text. For that, first is insert statement. That's the first argument. Second argument is column number. We don't care about column 0. It's the ID. It auto increments. We care about column 1, which is name. So we say column 1. Next argument is name str dot utf8 string. So that converts it to a C string. Next column, any limit on bytes, we'll say -1, no limit. And last argument, any additional data, nil, no extra stuff. So now we'll do the same thing for email and food. So we'll say SQLite 3 bind text, insert statement, this time column 2, this time email str dot utf8 string, no limit on bytes, and nil, no extra data. Finally, SQLite 3 bind text, insert statement, this time column 3, food str dot utf8 string, no limit on bytes, and nil, no extra data. At this point, we have our data and our query all set up, ready to go. All we have to do is execute it. To do that, we're going to run the SQLite 3 step function. So we'll say if SQLite 3 underscore step for insert statement. We'll check to see if it's equal to SQLite underscore done. Now I gotta fix my if there. That's better. Put some curlies in. Alright. So if it's successful, let's just print out to the console it's successful, and also print out the row number that was just inserted or added in. Look, to retrieve the newly inserted row number, we're going to say let row ID equal SQLite 3 underscore last insert row ID. We got to pass in the database, so DB. So it gets the last insert row ID for the database. And then do a print. So print successfully inserted row, and then do a slash row ID. There. And so now that'll print out the new row number. But since we're at it, let's do an else. We'll say else and print could not insert row, and say return code is false. Alright, at this point the transaction is basically done. We just have to clean up. So what we'll do here is finish up any memory allocations and flush data by using SQLite 3 finalize for insert statement. So that'll free up memory allocated for insert statement. And then outside of this if, where the else is for the insert cannot be repaired, we're going to say SQLite 3 underscore close for DB. So at this point, our insert statement is complete. Our insert into database function is complete. Now we need to use it. So we're going to jump back to viewcontroller.swift and work on getting our insert done. So since we're dealing with text fields, we need to bring in the text field delegate so we can get rid of the keyboard. So we'll say comma UI text field delegate. So we have class viewController extends UI viewController, implements UI text field delegate, and just to get that support method out of the way, we're going to say text field should return and say return text field dot resign first responder. So that's out of the way. We'll connect it up later. But let's define our outlets for the three text fields. So we'll say IB outlet var tf name extends UI text field exclamation mark IB outlet var tf email extends UI text field, and IB outlet var tf food extends UI text field. Now, all that's left to do is to create an event handler to handle adding this new person. So I'm going to call this function add person. So I'll say IB action func add person. Sender, let's say any. Alright, first step, let's retrieve name, email, and food from the text fields and put inside our data object. So we'll say let person extends data equal data.init. And then we'll say person.init with data, passing in tf_name.text, tf we'll say person.init with data. Row, we'll say 0, we'll just hard code to 0, it doesn't really matter. Name will be tf_name.text with exclamation mark. Email will be tf_email.text, exclamation mark. And food, tf_food.text, exclamation mark. Alright, so we got our person object ready to go. Now, all you need to do is go ahead and insert into database. Insert into database exists inside the app delegate, so we need to request access to our app delegate object. So we'll say let main delegate equal UI application.shared.delegate as app delegate. Alright, now we can go ahead and do the insert. So we'll say let return code equal main delegate dot insert into database, passing in person, the person object we just created. Now let's give some feedback back to the user about whether it was successful or it failed in its adding. So let's say var return msg of type bool equals main delegate of type string equals person added. Now, if return code happens to equal false, then we'll change return msg into person add failed. Okay, so person add failed. Now, let's get the alert box up and running. So we'll say let alert controller equal UI alert controller for, and we'll do that. So we'll say title will be SQLite add, message will be return msg, preferred style dot alert. Let's do our OK button. So we'll say let cancel action equal UI alert action, and we'll say title will be OK, style dot cancel, handler nil. No action there. Now we'll join the alert box to the cancel action button. So we'll say alert controller dot add action for cancel action. Finally, present it to the screen. So present alert controller animated true. Alright, so at this point we now have our event handler in place to add a new person to our database. Let's go ahead and connect things up and see if it works. So I'm going to switch over to main storyboard and click on my yellow circle there for the view controller page. Go to connections inspector. We have here TF email. Connect that to the email text field. We have TF food to the food text field. We have TF name to name text field. We have add person with sender. Connect that to our save button. Choose a touch up inside. Before forget, click on each text field. Each text field has a delegate. Connect that delegate to the yellow circle so we can get the cancel going for the keyboard, which we've covered in a past class. And now, go ahead and run. Alright, so I'm going to say my new character I'm going to add in will be Yina. And I'll say that Yina's email is yina@projectmkd.com. And we'll say he likes burgers. Hit save. It says SQLite, person added. I can hit OK. And I can see successfully inserted row 4. So let's go to view table. There's Yina. Yina likes burgers. Let's hit back. Walla. We'll say Walla@projectmkd.com. We'll say he likes leaves. Hit save. Person added. Hit OK. Insert row 5. Let's check the picker. And there's Walla. Walla likes leaves. So in a nutshell, we have full page navigation going on, and we basically have completed the app. But there's one more thing I want to add in for user friendliness, and that is to take advantage of the defaults. User defaults object, so we can save the data that was previously entered. See, it remembers it now, but what if I close the app and I start it again? My data is blank. Let's say I enter in Hita, and I hit view database using table. Didn't do any saving. Hit back. Well, Hita is still remembered, although it auto-corrected to something else, not what I wanted. But if I close the app and open it, you notice that the spaces are blank. Let's learn how to add in a little bit of functionality to remember previously entered information when we close and open the app. So there's an object called UserDefaults that allows us to basically remember or short-term or small little things that a database, even like SQLite, might be overkill for. So just remembering like previously entered information is a perfect use of user defaults. So to do that, inside our view controller, we're going to create a new method. I'm going to put it near our touches began method because it's going to be used there. So create this new method, func, call it remember entered data. Alright, now user defaults, the object, is a singleton, and saving data to it is very easy to do. So I'm going to say let defaults equal user defaults dot standard. So that requests access to the object user defaults. Now we're going to set some new keys. So these work on key value pairs. So we're going to set some new values here. We're going to say defaults dot set for tbname.text for key. We're going to provide a key. We'll call it last name. like last entered name or something. We're going to say defaults dot set for tb email dot text. Then for key last email. And then defaults dot set for tf food dot text for key last food. Now that should be tf name and tf email, of course, not tb, just to correct that up. Now once you've added in your items that you want to add as new keys, you need to flush the data to user defaults. To do that, you're going to say defaults dot synchronize. If you don't do this last line, you will have set these values, but they won't get saved. They'll get ignored. So this last line is critical if you want to save new data. Even to update data, you want to use synchronize so that it'll flush the data to user defaults and actually save it. Now, what happens when we want to retrieve the data? Well, we're going to retrieve the data inside ViewDidLoad. But before then, we need to have a way of saving the data at some point. So inside our touches method, touches began, every time we leave the screen, we want to remember previously entered information. So since our segue is here, we're going to call remember entered data in both if statements. So now this will get called whenever we segue away from the page. Now let's see how we can retrieve this data inside ViewDidLoad. Inside ViewDidLoad, nothing really is happening, so let's add some action to ViewDidLoad. First thing we do, request access to our defaults, user defaults. We'll say let defaults equal user defaults dot standard. Now we can't simply retrieve the object because what if the object never existed? So we have to test to see if it exists first, then we can save it or into our text fields. So let's do an if let. So we'll say if let name equals tf defaults dot object for key last name. Remember make sure the keys line up as string. Then we can say tbName dot text. Sorry, tf name dot text is equal to name. I'll do the same for the other two. So say if let email equal defaults dot object for key last email as string. Then we'll say tf email dot text is equal to email. And finally, if let food equal defaults dot object for last food as string, then tf food dot text equals food. There you go. Now we're able to retrieve previously entered information from our user defaults object in order to see if, in order to make life easier for our user. So all that's left to do is to run. All right. So I'm going to enter in a new person. So Ion. And I'll say Ion at projectmkd.com. I'll say his favorite food is raw meat. And I'll hit save. Person was added, row 6. Let's go to table. So we have Ion was there, hit OK, raw meat. hit back. Now he's there, but what if I close the app and open it again? And there, he's still there. Ion, projectmkt.com, raw meat. So now, in a nutshell, we've covered SQLite databases, how to navigate pages without a button, but still use segues in code using touch events. We learned how to display our data in a table. We learned how to display data in a PickerView, do event handling for both table and PickerView, and finally, be able to save our data using user defaults for like small, simple memory. And for SQLite, we got into learning how to put a database file into our file system, so navigating our file system, learning how to retrieve data from our database, learning how to insert into our database. So you can expand on this further and do a update or delete. So that'll be some homework for you guys to work on. So one last comment, the characters here belong to the game Munkee, Kissin, Dunkee 2, which can be found at projectmkt.com, as well as Code Llama, where you learn to code. Have some fun learning to code as an adventure game. So I invite you to check out projectmkt.com as well as codelama.com to see the characters in action. Until next time, take care and keep coding.